Chapter 3. The First Battle. The night was deep, and the flickering firelight cast shadows on the mercenaries' stern faces. Sitting among them, Alya could feel countless scrutinizing gazes upon her. Her palms were slightly damp with sweat, but her face remained calm. There was no turning back. During her escape, she had stumbled upon a parchment left behind by that mysterious man. It bore a set of coordinates. She had planned to follow the lead, but the Black Armor Legion was still conducting a large-scale hunt for her, making every step perilous. Just as she was being pursued to the edge of a cliff, she encountered this mercenary group. At the time, the mercenaries were carrying out a mission to clear out soul beasts along the border in exchange for a hefty reward. Alya had forcefully barged into their camp, seeking refuge. The mercenaries greeted her with hostility. In these chaotic times, no one would save a stranger without reason, especially not a girl who was clearly entangled in trouble. "Who exactly are you?" The mercenary leader, Victor, gazed at her sharply, his longsword held across her path. Any sudden move and she would be killed on the spot. "I'm not your enemy." Alya took a deep breath. "But I need to join you." A brief silence followed before a mercenary sneered. "Join us? You think a mercenary group is some kind of charity shelter for fugitives?" "I'm not looking for refuge. I can fight." Alya's voice was quiet but firm. Victor studied her, seemingly assessing her worth. After a moment he spoke slowly. "We don't take in the weak. If you want to join, you have to prove you're qualified." Alya's heart tensed. "How do I prove it?" Victor smirked, a knowing glint flashing in his eyes. "As it happens, we've just accepted a mission to exterminate dark soul beasts. You want to be a mercenary? Then go hunt a dark soul beast and come back alive. If you die, it only proves you never should have existed in this world." Alya's heartbeat quickened. Dark soul beasts, vicious and bloodthirsty creatures that ordinary people had no chance against. Yet she had no other choice. The Black Armor, Legion's relentless pursuit, the mysterious man's clues, the eerie awakening of the Netherworld soul beast. Everything was pushing her to grow stronger. If she didn't, the only fate awaiting her was death. She inhaled deeply, lifted her gaze to meet Victor's, and said firmly, "I accept." Carl, who had been silent, raised an eyebrow slightly, his gaze sweeping over her with intrigue. He didn't seem surprised by her decision. Rather, there was a trace of curiosity in his expression. "Let's hope you're not just bluffing." Morning departure. At dawn, the mercenary group set out. Alya moved within the ranks, quietly observing them. There were around 20 members, all battle-hardened, well-equipped, and maintaining strict discipline in combat. Their leader, Victor, was an experienced warrior, cold, decisive, and valuing strength above all else. Carl, one of the group's core fighters, was a highly skilled swordsman. He appeared carefree, but in truth, he was sharp and calculating. As they traveled through the dense forest, the air grew increasingly frigid, and a chilling mist spread through the trees. Their destination, an abandoned village, was not far ahead. Alya gazed at the ruins before her, her fingers instinctively tightening around the fabric of her sleeve. This mission might not just be a test. It could be a battle of life and death. A distant observer in the darkness, a figure stood atop a treetop in the distance, silently watching their path. The mysterious man murmured under his breath, "The Netherworld soul beast. How far will you grow?" A faint smile played at his lips before his figure vanished into the depths of the forest. As night fell, the sky seemed to be swallowed by ink, with thick layers of clouds obscuring the moonlight. The mercenary group followed a winding path into the abandoned village, where the air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, as if even breathing would taint them with the scent of death. Alya gripped her sword tightly, keeping close to the group as her eyes warily scanned the surroundings. She noticed that most of the village's buildings had collapsed, broken beams, littering the road and weeds growing unchecked, as if the place had been abandoned for decades. However, what was even more unsettling, there were no signs of life. Even the chirping of insects and birds had vanished. "These soul beasts are more terrifying than I imagined," Carl muttered under his breath, his hand already resting on his sword hilt, ready for battle at any moment. At the forefront of the group, Victor, the mercenary leader, wore a grim expression as he coldly commanded, "Stay alert, prepare for battle." The group advanced cautiously, the air so thick with tension that it felt suffocating. Suddenly, a faint scratching noise echoed from the dilapidated eaves in the distance, as if something was slowly creeping through the darkness. Then, in the depths of the shadows, a pair of crimson eyes silently opened. Whoosh! A dark figure shot out from the ruins, moving at an eerily fast speed, like a phantom. "Soul beasts!" someone shouted in alarm. In the next instant, countless pairs of crimson eyes ignited in the darkness, as if malevolent spirits from the abyss had awakened. "Fight!" Victor unsheathed his long blade and issued the order. The eerie howls of dark soul beasts pierced the night as dozens of massive figures lunged from all directions. Their bodies were covered in jet-black scales, their fangs bared, exuding a twisted aura of pure malice. These creatures were once living beings, now corrupted and transformed into mindless killing machines by dark forces. The mercenary group quickly formed battle positions. Arrows whistled through the air, blades glinted coldly as the first wave of attacks clashed with the oncoming soul beasts. The battle erupted in an instant. Alya took a deep breath, gripping her sword tightly, forcing herself to stay calm. "Aim for their legs first. Don't expect to take them down in one strike," Carl called out, swinging his sword to deflect a soul beast's claw. Alya nodded and charged toward the nearest dark soul beast, slashing her sword at its forelimb. Clang! Her blade struck its scales, but instead of cutting through, it made a metallic clang, as if hitting steel. Not even a scratch was left on the beast's body. Alya's heart sank. A numbing shock traveled up her arms. The soul beast let out a guttural snarl, its crimson eyes glinting with cruel intent. In the next moment, its razor-sharp claws slashed toward Alya's abdomen. "Damn it!" Alya instinctively rolled to dodge, but the soul beast was faster. Its claws tore across her shoulder, and fresh blood instantly seeped from the wound. She gritted her teeth, staggering back, but the beast did not relent. With its jaws wide open, it lunged at her. A crushing sense of doom pressed down on her, freezing her limbs in place. "Alya!" Carl's voice rang out from a distance, but he was held back by another soul beast, unable to come to her aid. Alya's eyes were locked on the approaching beast, yet her body refused to move. Terror had pinned her in place, her heartbeat pounding, like a war drum. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood. Was this the end? Just as the soul beast's fangs were about to sink into her, buzz! A pulse of eerie blue light suddenly erupted around her. It was as if something ancient and long dormant had awakened. A cold, mysterious aura spread through the air, and an unfamiliar energy surged into Alya's body. In that instant, an image flashed in her mind, a vision of undead soul beasts rampaging across a battlefield, tearing through flesh and devouring souls. Inside her, a forbidden power was being unleashed. Rah! A deep, otherworldly growl echoed as a massive undead soul beast, wreathed in spectral blue flames, materialized behind Alya. Its form was clearer than ever before. The eerie flames flickered in the night, its eyes glowing with an intelligence far beyond mere instinct. A gaze filled with both wisdom and boundless killing intent. Alya's pupils contracted. She could feel it. This soul beast wasn't just her companion. It was a part of her. the beast slowly lifted its head, fixing its gaze on the dark soul beast lunging toward Alya. Then, boom! A wave of soul energy rippled outward, instantly freezing. The dark soul beast mid-attack. A terrifying, invisible force had bound it in place. Its crimson eyes, once filled with bloodlust, were now clouded with fear. This energy was the aura of death. What is that? The mercenaries, stunned, momentarily halted their battle to stare at the scene unfolding before them. Alya's body slowly levitated, the mark on her palm glowing with an eerie blue light. At that moment, she felt it, her consciousness merging completely with the undead soul beast. This was it. The bond between her and the undead soul beast ran, far deeper than she had ever realized. The dark soul beast let out a panicked roar, struggling against the invisible force that bound it. But the moment the spectral blue flames touched its body, whoosh, it was instantly consumed. The beast's form disintegrated into ash, scattered by the wind. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence. Alya slowly descended, the glow in her hands fading. Her eyes, however, held a newfound calmness and a trace of shock. So this is the true power of the undead soul beast? The mercenaries exchanged uneasy glances. And not far away, hidden in the darkness, a shadowy figure watched everything unfold. A slow, knowing smile curled at the corner of his lips. At last, "You've awakened," he murmured softly, before vanishing once more into the night. Azure soul energy surged in the night, sweeping across the battlefield like a raging tide. The necromantic beast roared, the ghostly flames on its body burning ever fiercer. With every swipe of its claws, the cries and collapse of the dark soul, beasts followed. Alya stood at the center of the battlefield, her soul energy pulsating around her. She could clearly feel it. The necromantic beast within her had fully awakened. It was no longer just a passive, contract-bound existence. It had become a part of her, and perhaps it was even guiding her actions. The azure imprint in her palm still lingered with heat, resonating as if in sync with the power of her beast. The surrounding dark soul beasts hesitated, intimidated by her necromantic energy, reluctant to approach. But the necromantic beast gave them no chance to retreat. Boom! Alya flicked her hand, sending a wave of soul energy sweeping forward like a hurricane, tearing through several dark soul beasts at once. The mercenaries watched in stunned silence, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. "Is this really human power?" one of the mercenaries murmured, his grip on his sword trembling. Carl drew in a sharp breath, his gaze locked onto Alya. He had known her soul beast was unique, but never had he imagined she could unleash such terrifying strength. The azure soul energy was wild and merciless. Every movement she made brought forth the anguished cries of the dark soul beasts. They began retreating instinctively, no longer daring to pounce at her recklessly. Yet Alya's consciousness seemed to be overtaken by a primal battle instinct. Her actions grew increasingly fluid, her eyes gleaming with a cold clarity. Every strike she executed was precise, with no unnecessary movements. She lunged forward, her sword cleaving through the nearest dark soul beast. The blade sliced through, its scales, and in an instant, the ghostly blue flames surged into the wound. Within moments, the beast convulsed in agony before collapsing into a pile of dark dust. Another dark soul beast took the opportunity to lunge at her from the side, its claws gleaming with deadly intent as they slashed toward her flank. Alya merely tilted her body slightly, spinning in an eerie half-turn. The arc of her sword traced through the air, leaving behind a streak of blue light. Schlick! The beast's head flew off in an instant, its body twitching before dissipating into a cloud of black mist. This battle wasn't even on the same level. The mercenaries watched with growing unease. The dark soul beasts that had driven them into such a desperate struggle were now utterly powerless before Alya. Her soul power. It's like a natural disaster. This kind of strength. Is this really Alya? They exchanged glances, their eyes filled with both fear and doubt. But as they looked back at the battlefield, they realized something. The tide of battle had completely turned. The dark soul beasts, despite their aggression and their advantage, under the cover of night, were now too afraid to approach the mercenary group. They could feel it, the crushing force of the necromantic beast's energy. The dark corruption within them began to tremble uncontrollably under its presence. Now. Full-scale attack! Victor! The mercenary captain saw the shift and gave the order without hesitation. Snapping out of their shock, the mercenaries raised their weapons and charged at the dark soul beasts with renewed vigor. Kill them all! Blades clashed, and the sounds of battle erupted once more. The mercenary group's morale soared, and they struck down the dark soul beasts with a newfound ferocity. Within mere minutes, the battlefield had been completely overturned. The dark soul beasts howled in agony. Under the relentless assault of the mercenaries, they fell one by one, leaving behind only their scattered remains. Under the night sky, the air was thick with the scent of blood and the fading echoes of soul energy. The battle was finally over. The mercenaries gasped for breath, standing amidst the carnage, the relief of survival washing over them. But soon, they noticed something strange. Wait. One of the mercenaries frowned, pointing at the dark soul beast corpses. Something's not right about these remains. Victor stepped forward, scrutinizing the bodies. His expression darkened. These wounds. They're not natural. Following his gaze, the others finally noticed it. Etched into the flesh of the dark soul, beasts were strange rune-like marks, as if branded by some dark force. Even more disturbingly, these marks bore an uncanny resemblance to the sigils of the long-lost undead legion. A chilling silence fell over the group. That's impossible, Carl muttered, his brows furrowing. The undead legion was wiped out centuries ago. Why do these beasts bear their markings? Victor's voice was grim. Something is very wrong here. His gaze lifted, settling on Alya. A complex look flickered in his eyes. One by one, the mercenaries turned to look at her as well. Their expressions were a mix of awe, fear, and suspicion. They had just witnessed her overwhelming display of power, the sheer force of her soul energy, the devastating might of her necromantic beast. Was she really just an ordinary contract holder? Alya lowered her gaze to her palm. The ghostly blue imprint still glowed faintly, radiating an eerie warmth, as if whispering secrets she could not yet understand. She pressed her lips together, a sense of unease creeping into her heart. What was the true nature of her necromantic beast's power, and what did these dark soul beast markings mean? Beyond the battlefield, hidden in the shadows, a figure remained watching her. A smirk played at the corner of his lips. Huh. As expected, she is the key to this game. He chuckled softly before turning away, his form vanishing into the darkness under the cloak of night. The curtain of crisis had only just begun to rise. The aftermath of battle had yet to fully subside in the dark forest. The night wind carried the scent of soil and blood, spreading through the silent air. The mercenaries sat around the campfire, their faces still marked by exhaustion from the fight. But more than physical fatigue, their hearts were filled with shock and doubt. All eyes unconsciously fell on Alya. She... What exactly is she? A mercenary murmured in a low voice, unable to conceal the fear in his eyes. I've never seen a soul beast like that. It shouldn't exist. Another mercenary gripped his weapon tightly, his gaze full of wariness. Her soul power is nothing like a human's. Maybe she's not an ordinary contract wielder at all. As soon As those words fell, the air tensed instantly. Alya's hands trembled slightly. She could clearly feel the stares directed at her: shock, hesitation, vigilance, and even hostility. They were afraid of her. Enough. A steady voice broke the silence. The mercenary leader, Victor, slowly stood up, his gaze sweeping over everyone like a sharp blade. She just saved all of you, and now you're doubting her? His deep, authoritative voice left no room for dispute. Some of the mercenaries flinched, lowering their heads, but a few still murmured in discontent. Leader, you saw it too. Her power is too strange. That's not something an ordinary contract wielder should have. Yeah, and her soul beast doesn't resemble any known type. It seems more like some kind of forbidden existence. Silence once again settled over the group. At this moment, the mercenary corps was clearly divided. Some believed that Alya had saved them, and that, regardless of how unusual her soul beast was, she shouldn't be distrusted. Others, however, saw her very presence as a threat, perhaps even tied to dark forces. A decision needed to be made quickly, or the entire group might be dragged into unknown dangers. The firelight flickered across their faces, revealing their wavering expressions. Calm down. Carl suddenly stood up, his gaze firm as he stepped beside Alya without hesitation. If not for her, we would have died at the claws of those dark soul beasts. Now that the fight is over, you want to drive her away? Carl, a mercenary frowned. It's not that we don't appreciate her help, but her soul beast is truly abnormal. Aren't you even a little worried? Carl clenched his teeth, refusing to back down. No matter what, she's one of us. Victor, however, let out a quiet sigh. His deep, unreadable gaze lingered on Alya before he spoke slowly. Alya, give us an explanation. Alya's heart sank instantly. Her fist tightened, nails digging into her palms, but she felt no pain. She knew. She couldn't reveal the truth about the undead soul beast. If she did, there would be no understanding, only deeper fear, or worse, exile, and a hunt against her. But if she didn't explain, could she even stay in the mercenary corps? The firelight flickered against her pale face. Her throat tightened. All eyes were fixed on her, waiting for her answer. Alya parted her lips, but had no idea how to respond. Silence dragged on. The tension in the air grew thicker, each passing second like a blade slicing through the skin, making it difficult to breathe. Finally, Victor withdrew his gaze, staring deeply at Alya before speaking in a measured tone. If you can't give us an explanation, we will have no choice but to ask you to leave the mercenary corps. The words landed like an invisible verdict, weighing heavily on Alya's heart. Her chest tightened, her fingertips turning cold. She didn't want to leave, but right now, she had no way to prove herself. Could she trust them? Would they even accept the truth about her identity? Just then, a mercenary suddenly furrowed his brows, as if recalling something, and murmured, "Strange. These dark soul beasts, they seem to be connected to a certain imperial forbidden plan." Everyone froze and turned to him. Forbidden plan? Victor's gaze darkened. Explain. The mercenary hesitated before lowering his voice. I once heard something in the imperial capital about secret research into a certain undead power. If these dark soul beasts are truly related to that project. He didn't finish, but the same thought surfaced in everyone's mind. Was Alya's soul beast really just a coincidence? Once again, an eerie silence enveloped the air. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on Alya's pale face. Her heart pounded violently, her fingers trembling slightly. She knew the Real crisis was just beginning.